This is Rachel Manella sitting with Grandmaster Z on February 21st, 2022 at his home in Novi, Michigan. We're going to discuss Master Z's accomplishments in Isshinryu Karate and his work as a martial arts instructor. Can you please state and spell your name for me?
My name is Edmund Zellop. It's Edmund Szellap. In the martial arts community, I'm known as Mr. Z.
And where were you born?
Dickinson, North Dakota.
Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up?
Well, my parents had a small farm, and I spent most of my young days there and with my dad's mother taking care of us. They started working us in the field at the age of 5. So then my dad moved to Michigan in the early 60s, and we ended up in Troy, Michigan. He was working for Shell Oil, and later on, through other circumstances, my dad lost the house and business in Troy, and we ended up in the east side of Detroit, down on Harper and Van Dyke. And I was there until my parents split up just before I graduated high school. And then I took off across the United States for a little while, about a year, traveling to different places and people I knew while visiting them. I came back to Michigan because there was always work here, and then in '73 I went to work for General Motors. Spent 15 years with them, working my way up the ladder. Hated it, and finally quit in 84, 85, somewhere in there. I don't quite remember anymore. Went into construction because I had worked with my dad my whole life. Never played as a kid, so every day after school my dad would come and get me. I'd go to work with him. Every weekend I went to work. Holidays I worked. So, that was really my life. I never played baseball, basketball, football, none of that kind of stuff. Didn't learn to swim, didn't do any of that stuff. So I learned how to work.
Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I've got 2 brothers and a sister. When my parents split, I stayed with my dad, and my brothers and my sister went with my mother. So, and then my dad disappeared for a while, and I was out on my own. So, but I got interested in them. I was always interested in the martial arts, but I had a chance when I was working for General Motors. I met a couple of guys, and I ended up starting training in officially in Tang Sudo with Master Cells out of Ann Arbor. And a couple of years after that, I met another martial artist there that worked for me, but never told me he was a martial artist. And he introduced me to Robert White. And Robert White is the person that I trained with the longest and considered my karate master for the longest time. But he introduced me to just dozens of other masters of Isshinryu and other styles, and allowed me to train on the side with them. So he was just one of those martial artists that was really seeking the truth and knowledge. didn't really care about rank and stuff like that, so I never really cared about rank. He was a real hard nose. All those guys in the early days in Isshinryu, they were all really hard. You know, everything was, there were no protective pads, none of that kind of safety gear like we have today. And you learned to get quick, because if you didn't, you got hurt. And everybody had broken bones, busted, knocked out teeth, broken nose. That was bruising. That was just common everyday stuff. And that was in training. Tournaments, the same thing. There was no protective stuff back then. You got hurt. It's the way it was. I'm not a violent person by nature. I don't like fighting. But I was too stubborn to quit, because really back then at the dojo, we'd take in, 60, 70, 80 people a month. And by the end of 3 months, if you had 2 or 3 of them left, that was good. By the end of 6 months, if you had 1 left, that was good. So the dojo never really got very big. It was always, in flux constantly. People coming and people going. Most people quit before they ever got out of white belt.
At that time, would it have been mostly adults?
It was mostly adults, a few teenagers. But that's, and most of them were males, male adults. All of them had, a lot of them were coming back from the war. They didn't even want to teach kids. Even later on, when we did have to start taking in kids, and the reason they took in kids is because it was the only way to keep the doors open. And most of the instructors and most of the dojo owners didn't teach the kids. They would have their lower belts come in and start teaching the kids. So I was teaching from the time I was a green belt.
When you mentioned other styles besides Tang Sudo, what other ones did you?
Well, I went to green belt in Tang Sudo. I got my black belt in Taekwondo underneath Don Pru. I studied Kung Fu and Tai Chi under Gary Torres, and he was a head student of Peter Kwok. There was a few others there along those lines that I studied that type of martial arts also, different martial arts, bits and pieces of it. I trained with Joe Louis for a little while. He was not Joe Louis the boxer, but Joe Louis the karate guy. And then I had a chance to train with I got a list of 25 or 30 guys who are all in Isshinryu masters. But Bob White was the main guy. Ken Pitaway was over us. Willie Adams, Donnelly, Pogue, Gary Alexander. If you look up any of these names, you'll see who they are. Of course, Melton, Roy Osborne. He was teaching Isshinryu. He'd been in Okinawa the longest. Avincula, of course, he married Tatsu's daughter. He was there for 16 or 17 years in Okinawa before he came back here. Seo Oyata, he was a Tuatei man out of Okinawa that came here. Got to train with him for quite a long time. Gary, I said Gary Torres, that was Tai Chi and Kung Fu. Armstrong, which was Isshinryu, he was one of the head guys at that time. Jennings and Wazo used to come here all the time. Sherman Harrell, Harold Long, TJ Edwards, I trained with him, and he trained with me for 3 years, got his black belt from me, but he was a 5th degree master in Isshinryu. We still see each other to this day. Sifu Wazel, that was another one that was Kung Fu and Tai Chi. Kisei Fusei, who was TJ's Edwards instructor. When I finally promoted TJ, he gave me my 6th in Isshinryu. And I had that before I had my higher ranks in Isshinryu. So, but I was never really part of, although I was with Master White for a long, long time, 30 years, I was never really a part of the inner circle with him because I didn't go out drinking with those guys. I didn't agree with the way they hurt each other all the time. And I always thought there was a better way to teach. All of that hurting people and beating each other up and breaking bones, it didn't make him a better martial artist at all. And that was never the original intent of the old masters. They didn't go around just beating everybody up. They really didn't want to use their martial arts if they didn't have to. The problem with martial arts, as we see it today in America, all these Marines, that's where it really came to America, was from the Marines after World War II. But they were over there and they didn't have, most of them had 18 months overseas before they were shipped back. So they were always looking for something to do, and of course with all the karate masters over there, they got a chance to train with all kinds of guys. But they never got the real root of what martial arts was. It was for defense. These guys turned it into an aggressive thing. Well, they're all aggressive Marines fighting for their life. And karate was originally developed to fight for your life against the aggressors that were constantly coming over and trying to take over Okinawa. Whether it was the Japanese, the Koreans, the Chinese. So the Okinawan people developed this empty hand fighting, which is karate, is 2 words, karate, means empty hand. So they weren't allowed to have weapons. Anyone caught with a weapon was put to death immediately. So they learned to kill their armed aggressors that were there, their people that were their conquerors, with their bare hands. Well, that was right up the Marines. They liked that. And so what happened then is that became the standard. Well, to be a true martial artist, a true man of karate, a man of peace, you have to learn the other side of it. It isn't just about all the aggression, it's about learning how to handle yourself in society, how to walk away, how to not get your, don't take offense when people talk to you a certain way. Know that you have the capability of defending yourself and hurting somebody, and that it's better to walk away than hurt somebody. So the guy says something to you, he calls you something, so what? What does that mean to you in the grand scheme of things? Nothing. Nothing. What those people think of you is unimportant. It's the people that you care about, and it's the people that you interact with. Those are the people that you worry about. And that's the thing that got lost, and is still mostly lost today. So and loyalty, that's another thing, that so many of the martial artists today, they're not promoting fast enough, they're not this, they're not that, so they go look for somebody else. Oh, this guy here, he'll promote me if I come join his club. This guy will promote me if I come over there and pledge my loyalty to him. Well, I know guys that have changed school 8, 9 times just so they can get promoted. Did they learn anything? No. And those that kept taking them in, knowing what they were doing, they had some kind of a problem of their own, because they apparently couldn't get enough students of their own to feel like they were accomplishing anything. That's why they would go raiding other schools and trying to talk other people into leaving their dojo and come over to my dojo, and I can teach you this and I can do that and I can promote you here. I never did any of that. I trained with a lot of different guys, but I always asked permission, and I still stayed loyal to my original instructor, still went and trained with him all the time, let him know what I was doing. And that was important. That was out of respect. To this day, I still consider Bob White my full instructor, full-time master.
Can you trace your Isshinryu lineage? So your instructor would have been Bob White. Can you trace it back to Master Shimabuku?
Yeah. Well, Shimabuku trained a lot of guys, but the first 7 were the important ones. Nagel was one of them, and Armstrong. Bob White ended up training with one of Nagel's top students that he sent to Michigan to start dojos here with Ken Pittaway. And so Bob, back then, you could train here and then go to Okinawa and get your test and get your certificate. And Master White did go to Okinawa and did get a certificate from Tatsu Shimabuku. So the way Bob looks at it, and I do too, is he got a certificate from Shimabuku, so that's 1 removed. And I got my certificate from Bob. So I'm 2 removed from that. I've tried to stay very true to how the katas were taught to me. I don't try to change them. I don't try to flower them up, but I do teach other things. And this is where a lot of guys go wrong. They add all kinds of things to Isshinryu, and they claim that's part of Isshinryu, but it's not part of Isshinryu. Isshinryu was taught a particular way with a certain flair for fighting, a certain way, or defending yourself. But if you're a martial artist at all and you've been around for a long time, you will seek out other things. And you do that and you find things that may be more suited to you. Certain techniques, certain things that you like, certain things that you're able to do easier. And so you add that. But I always separate those. Those things are not part of Isshinryu. So, but here's some other techniques that you can learn. Learn this, try this. This might work better for you. Because we can't all, martial arts wasn't originally taught as one thing for everybody. They would take a look at your age, your size, your infirmities, and they would say to you, well, this is what I'm going to teach you because I think this is best suited for what you're capable of doing. And so Isshinryu really was one of the ones that first came along and everything was taught the same to everybody. But the audience that he had, the clientele that he had, were all big strapping Marines. That's who they originally taught. He never taught regular people, Americans or others that weren't Okinawan. So there was only one way to teach them. So that did not work well when it came back to America and they started opening dojos, because everybody I know teaches the way they were taught. There's a few of us, and I got this from Master Pogue, who I got through Master White, and I'm still friends with Master Pogue to this day, and he's taught me a lot. He's an Isshinryu man also. And he's the first one that said, what's more important? Having a dojo where everybody, actually what he said was, do you want a dojo that has 20 students and you have one good one? Or do you want a dojo where you've had thousands of students and you end up with hundreds of good ones? He said, how many people can you affect? He says, it isn't just about the fighting. He said, you can change people's lives. You can make life less stressful for them. You can take people that are overly aggressive and make them less aggressive. You can take those that are too meek and bring them to the center. You can help with their confidence, build the human being. And so that really stuck with me, resonated with me. And in 1990, I sat down with Dr. Pogue and we came up with a system of how to teach, taking young people and making them martial artists for life. And I talked with Master White about it, and him and Dr. Pogue were pretty close. And so he allowed me to explore that, and I didn't see any successful Isshinryu dojos as far as having a lot of students and being able to make a living at it. So I got tied up with Don Prue out of California. He came here to open dojos in Michigan, and they were a hybrid Taekwondo. And they had a system for opening schools and training instructors. So I went, because Taekwondo was huge here in America. They had dojos everywhere. So I wanted to learn their business sense, see what it was. What made them different, what made them successful, how did they deal with the public? And I spent 3 years with them doing that while I was training in Isshinryu and developing this system that I teach today. I still teach straight Isshinryu, but it's how you teach it, and young people and adults, doesn't make any difference who they are. I took that to Master White, and this is why I originally did it. I wanted to help him have he wanted to just teach karate full time if he could. So I thought I could help him do that. But every time I brought these things to every dojo, everybody was resistant, very resistant to change. Well, that's not how we do. That's kiddie karate. You're not teaching, you're not banging, you're not being hard enough, you're not, Well, you can't, you're losing hundreds and hundreds of students, people that'll never come back because of the way they got hurt. And they were good people. The people that stuck around back in the day were people that were already aggressive, were already a little on the wild side. They were getting into bar fights and hurting people, and the slightest infraction that they felt you put towards them, they would want to punch you in the face, So why are we making those people more dangerous? The people that really needed martial arts were those people that were everyday family people, good people, people that didn't want to hurt anybody, people that only, would get aggressive in a life and death situation, or if someone tried to hurt their loved one or a child, but they didn't have any idea how to defend themselves because they never had to do any of that kind of stuff. So those are the type of people that I wanted to train. And that's what my system did. And I worked with Master White and some of the other masters of Isshinryu in the Detroit area for 3-4 years. It was just a constant struggle, a constant fight. So I talked to Master White and opened my own dojo in Highland, Michigan.
What year was that?
1990, we opened a satellite school under Master White. In 1992, I officially opened family self-defense centers. And using the system of teaching that I came up with and Dr. Pogue helped me develop is what I've been teaching ever since. And we have a successful dojo. From the time we opened up, we've been above 100 students every month, sometimes as high as 150, 170 students. Most of the students that we have start with us early in life, and they're with us till they go off to college, and then they come back after college. That's what it should be. Taking students at 5 years old, 6, 7 years old, start training them. They stay with you all that time. Achieve their black belt. You teach them how to deal with other people. You teach them how to teach. You teach them how to talk to adults. All the things that we do in the dojo have made their lives better, taken the stress out of their lives because they don't worry about things. They're very self-confident, and that's done through the system of how we teach it. You start them off, and when I started martial arts, there was only 4 belt ranks. There was white, green, brown, black. Before that, there was only 2, white and black. Okay, we trained for 18 years, 20 years. Your belt got dirty enough that it looked black, and then you were awarded your black belt. To keep track of where people were is why they added colors. And then eventually different systems started adding multiple colors, and I adopted that in 1990, the multiple colors. Only because in America, we're a fast food society. Everybody wants everything quick. They want to know where they're at, what, you know, they want to be able to judge and gauge where they're at. So we adopted the Taekwondo belt rank system, changed it slightly, added a couple more brown belts to it so we could, because of the number of katas that we have. And we were able to use that belt rank system to build confidence in young students. So I like to say their training is 1/3 of their training. The first third of their training is 90% mental, 10% physical. If I tell them to do a straight punch, I don't care if it goes here, it goes there, the arm went straight. That's good. See? But back in the day when I was training, the punch had to be exact. Comes from here, the wrist had to be straight, the knuckles had to come down, it had to come straight out with a rise and pull back. Well, I didn't get my first belt change or rank change. It took me 3 years because of that. The first 90 days that I trained, all I did was do crescent steps up and down the dojo and do physical training as far as exercises are concerned. Most people quit. We were used for punching bags. Okay, we're gonna have 1 steps. So you throw a punch at this guy and he's, you know, so the students that were around already for several months or years, they would hammer on you, trying to get you to quit. But with our system, do you know what we broke down the punches to a smaller number. First 7, you know, the first 7 punches. If you could do the 7 punches and they looked like they were punches, then you were able to go up in belt rank. The early belt ranks were only used to build confidence, show that they could do it. It didn't have anything to do with their ability. The second third of their training was 50-50. 50% physical, 50% mental. Now we were trying to smooth out the wrinkles, put a little finesse in it. The last third of their training is 10% mental and 90% physical. Learning how to actually use your body, the weapons that you have. But if you don't build the mind first, if you don't build the love of what they're doing in there, make it fun for them so that they'll stick it out, make it so they believe they can do it. Because when we were doing demonstrations back in the day, we'd have people come in for a demo day. We're breaking bricks, we're doing weapons, you know, we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Most people, even the adults, they look at, I'm not going to be able to do that. And we got very few people that joined, you know, normal people. We have very few normal people that would join. So you have to make them believe they can do it. And if once you can make them believe they do it and you show them some respect, now you got to teach them how to communicate. Teach them it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to make a mistake. We all make mistakes. There's people in our society who are so afraid of making a mistake, it stops them from doing things. And young people too. You can't be yelling at them and treating them like little soldiers, but that's how most people taught because they were soldiers when they learned. Stand at attention, be still, don't move, don't this, don't that. You better bow to me. You don't speak till you're spoken to. That just doesn't work with society. So how are you going to be successful when you're scaring away, you know, 90% of the people that you want to teach? So we eliminated all of that. I don't even wear my belt at class. I don't wear my uniform at class because that's scary, okay, to the kids. it's better that they feel they can come to you with anything, and that's what's important. Them building that relationship between the instructor and the student, so that when they're having troubles and they're afraid to even go talk to their parents, they'll come and talk to you, and you can talk to their parents. And you know, I don't try to teach kids anything that goes against what their parents believe. You can't do that either. You want to reinforce their parents' role in their lives, and that's what we do. We have kids that are 6 and 7 years old that are leading groups of men, leading adults, and vice versa. The guys working with the kids, it softens them a little bit. It gives them time to be playful, and it changes the dynamics in the dojo. We have the kids and the adults trained together, always have since the day we started. And it makes for a family atmosphere. And so instead of being in competition, they're all trying to help each other. Everybody trying to achieve the same goal. Most dojos, I don't think they get, well, back in the day, it took years to get a black belt. So you'd have 1 or 2 or 3 testing every 3 or 4 years. Today, most dojos, I think they're lucky if they get 2 or 3 black belts a year. We average 20 a year, 20 black belts a year. We have just tons of promotions. And that's rare. That's really, really rare. Now, some people say, some of the people that I'm dealing with in Isshinryu, well, on the early days, they always said, well, you know, that's kiddie karate. You're not really teaching karate. Nobody's, you know, they can't defend themselves. They don't do well. Well, in 1992, when I opened my facility up at Highland, my wife and I did, we set out to dispel that. So I picked a group of students, and we trained those students for tournament. And for years after that, I mean, for 20 years after that, we took more trophies in kata, weapons, and fighting than any other school anywhere ever has. There are times we'd go to tournament and we'd actually walk away with 100, 101, 102 trophies with 30, 35 students, which means we just about wiped out everything. We had several schools that quit coming to tournaments when they knew we were going. Now, the thing is, I never had any of my black belts or myself judge at any of these tournaments. We went to other tournaments and we had all these other schools judging us. And yet we were winning all the time. So they can't say that we're doing bad martial arts. Our students, over the last 20 years, I have hundreds of students that have been recognized by the Hall of Fame as being top in the country. Our instruction staff has been recognized by the Hall of Fame as being in the top instructors in the country. Our dojo has been chosen as being in the top 5 dojos in the country 21 years in a row. And sometimes we were the top dojo. So I think we have done our job in dispelling the way people feel about this is kiddie karate. That you have to be violent and hard and, you know, beat people to see if they have the mettle to make it. It isn't necessary. They didn't do that in the old days. Now, yeah, they trained hard physically. They did makawara, they did all kinds of things that would build the body's strength to take punishment. But they didn't hurt each other on purpose. And a lot of schools here hurt each other on purpose. As far as learning martial arts in the greater Detroit area, out of the greater Detroit area in the Hall of Fame, we have the most people inducted into the Hall of Fame. There's 30 people from the Detroit area that got their start there have all been inducted into the Hall of Fame. And there's only about 150 inductees from across the world. So that'll tell you the type of martial artists that come out of the Detroit area.
You were inducted in 2016.
Yeah.
What did that mean to you?
It was a validation of what my students have accomplished. It wasn't about me. Whether I was inducted or not isn't that big a deal to me. Whether I have rank, which I have these days, is not a big deal to me. But that was instilled in me by my first instructor. It's about the knowledge. I was able to, I was supposed to give a seminar when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, where I could showcase my talents and do all that type of thing. Instead of me doing that, I brought, 20 students to the Hall of Fame. Some of them were as young as 7, 8 years old, and I had them teach everybody. And that was really the highlight of my getting into the Hall of Fame. We had a few old masters that wouldn't participate, but most did. And they were really, really surprised at how well the young people did at teaching them something they'd never learned before. And what we taught them were two-person katas, which we developed, and to help in understanding fighting and body movement, and an old lost kata by Tatsu Shimabuku called Gojo Shiho, his version of it. And everybody wanted to come to that seminar. They had so many people coming to that seminar, they had to break it up and force some of the people to go to the other seminars. So I think we proved our point there. And all these young students that were there, they've all been champions multiple times. They've been recognized by the Hall of Fame more than once. Instructional staff has been recognized more than once. I don't know what else to say. It's just, that has really been the highlight of my martial arts career for me. So.
What year did you earn your black belt?
Oh God, it was. God, I can't be sure. I think it was sometime between 88 and 90. It was somewhere in there. I really never kept track of it.
And so you were mentioning that when your students were able to teach in the seminar was one of the highlights of your career, but thinking back to when you were competing at tournaments or going to events, are there any that stand out to you or testings for yourself?
Tournaments, I think I have two that really stand out for me, two for different reasons. One was the Grand Nationals, and I think it was 82 or 84. It might have been 80 or 82. Held in Northville, Michigan. And back then we only had two divisions. We had lightweight and heavyweight. If you were over 165 pounds, you fought in the heavyweight. And we were fighting guys at that time, if you were in the heavyweight division, they could be 230, 240 pounds, 300 pounds. Well, I was 166. And I was fighting a guy they called Baby Huey. Big guy. 6'4". This guy had to be 350 pounds, but he was muscle, wasn't fat. And I just dreaded going in the ring, but I went in the ring. And right off the bat, I threw a high kick into his chest and broke my foot. I hit him so hard, and he just reached down and punched me in the face and knocked me to the ground. I got up. I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know it was my foot was broken at the time. I got up and I was having trouble standing with my right foot forward, so I put it to the back, and from then on I couldn't kick. And he was just so big. He took me 1, 2, 3, just reached down, punched me each time, and knocked me to the ground. And when I walked off, my foot just swelled up so big, I had to go to the hospital and have my foot bound up and taken care of. But that's the way it was. I've had my ribs in tournaments and in the dojo itself. I've had broken ribs 40 times, broken hand, shoulder dislocated, teeth knocked out. Never had my nose broken. My hands were always fast enough to protect my big nose. But you had to be fast. So that was the one. The other one was I was at a Korean tournament, Tang Sudo tournament, and it was all Korean judges, and I was fighting at the very end for the top spot, myself and their top guy. And we fought for 7, 8 minutes, and I couldn't get a point. They just wouldn't give me the point. And he couldn't score on me. Finally, the tournament director, the head guy, came and took over the ring. And I scored 2 points, he scored 3. But every time I'd hit this guy, every time I'd get in on him, they would not give me the point. They were so... Every tournament, every dojo that had tournaments back in those days, their students had to be number one. Their students had to win. If somebody else was winning, it wasn't fair. They just couldn't believe it. And that tournament sticks out for me. And I know I didn't win, supposedly. But I know in my mind I did, because I scored on this guy over and over and over again. They just wouldn't give me the points. And the fact that the tournament director had to come in and take over the ring shows just what it was all about. I still didn't win, but at least I got a couple of points on the guy. And that one sticks out to me. The rest of them were all just, and I wasn't a great fighter, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't afraid to go in and fight. I fought every time that my instructors asked me to, and I went to every tournament that I could go to, because it was a necessity for me. I was fearful, always had been. I grew up on the streets of, in my teenage years, I grew up on the streets of Detroit on the east side during the riots. I must have been involved in 90 fights on the street. And a lot of them I ended up in the hospital. So, I had to overcome that. That's why I took martial arts, to feel comfortable, to feel like I can defend myself when I get out there in the street. And so it did a lot for me, because as a young man I was angry, I was upset, I was fearful. So if somebody said something to me, I hit them right away, because I feel I have no choice. If I don't get in there right off the bat and tangle, they're not going to leave me alone. And that worked well for me, because I'm telling you, I'm one of those guys, I had to carry a gun to school. That's the truth. And I got caught with it too. I got in trouble for it. I have fought almost every day for the first 3 years when I walked to school. I walked several miles to go to school. I went to a Catholic school. But it was that no man's land in between Harper and Van Dyke and Gratiot where I got in a fight every single day. After a couple of years, they didn't bother me anymore, because they knew as soon as they approached me, we were going to tangle. And I didn't care if I got beat up or not, because I did a lot of times. Sometimes I didn't. But after a while, it was too costly for them. They knew they were going to get hurt. They were going to get punched. It wasn't going to be a fun time. They weren't going to lord it over me. And that's what my dad taught me. My dad was a Golden Gloves boxer in the service. And he said, they look at you cross-eyed, hit them. Get the first look in and just go for it, because otherwise they're never going to leave you alone. And so that was my first foray into fighting, having to defend myself. And so by the time I was in high school, nobody bothered me. I walked the streets anywhere or way or time I wanted, any time of the night. It was okay. I felt okay doing that, but I was always on edge, always on edge. So martial arts, I have found, will take a really meek person and bring them up to a level that's normal, and take somebody that's overly aggressive and bring them down to a level that's normal, that society can accept.
Do you have any opinions about governing bodies of Isshinryu or martial arts in general?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. In Okinawa, in Japan, and karate didn't come from Japan. Everybody thinks it did. Japan thinks they owned Okinawa their whole life, but they didn't. The real karate came from Okinawa. There wasn't a governing body until the 1920s, when the all Japan Budokai got together and finally decided to recognize systems, because things were cropping up all over the place, and to recognize who the headmasters of systems were. And this was all because of an incident in what they called the Russian Sino games. The Russians were always coming to Japan, and they had these fighting games, and the Russians were always winning. This guy would just beat the heck out of these Japanese, and they just couldn't overpower the size and the height of these Russian fighters. An Okinawa master was visiting Japan during that period, and he was taken to the games, and he's watching what's going on, and the Russian challenged Master, anybody in the audience. Well, Master Motobu took the challenge, went up there, and nearly beat this guy to death. And in fact, he did die on his way back when they sent him back home. He died on the trip back. And the Japanese were just floored that this little Okinawan beat this guy. Well, there's a caste system there, and Motobu was of what they considered a lowbrow. So they wouldn't learn from him. So he took his number one student, Funakoshi, and they would learn from him. Funakoshi was a teacher in Okinawa. So that's how karate came to Japan. And then during that period of time is when they decided, well, we've got to find out who the real masters are, who these different systems are. And that's when the Budokai was formed, and everybody was given rank and belt and all that kind of stuff came about. Before that, it was just a hodgepodge. Oh, I heard this guy is really good, this guy fights, this guy can do that. You would travel around and try to learn things, at least. Now, Okinawa was 8 miles by 90 miles. It was easy for them to walk around and find guys and learn. When martial arts was introduced to the Marines in 1947, those instructors that were teaching Americans had no idea of the vast size of the United States. And so the loyalties that students had there to their masters and the respect changed when it came to this country. When Shimabuku first came here, he was just in awe. He did not understand how big this country was until they flew him back and forth across it several times. And that's why they had to have so many different, eventually had so many different ruling bodies in America because of the size of it. One man could not oversee the Isshinryu Empire that was being built. There were just too many egos. You got a lot of Marines that are all gung-ho, the first into the breach, and they all got big egos, and they have to have. And so there was a lot of infighting. And so they all formed different organizations, different groups, and that's how he got so many different high ranks. But they actually, at one point in time, they broke it into 5 areas of the country with a different board over all of them that reported to the main board. The main board used to travel around. Vincula was on that board, Lulazat, Armstrong, a couple of others. They would travel around and then they would oversee all promotions. But as it grew and got larger and larger, it just couldn't be done. Too many fragile egos too. That's why people broke away. So I've always tried to stay loyal to my instructors. Master White, I never showed disrespect. And I tried to help them all I could, thinking that this is the way it was meant to be, it's the way it was supposed to be. But you can't keep breaking away, starting your own organization, and then think your people are going to be loyal to you, because they're not. Because when they get dissatisfied, they're going to do the same thing you did. And so that's the biggest problem in karate, Okinawan karate here in the States today. So the only board that I truly recognize today is the Hall of Fame. Tatsushimabuku set that up, gave permission to Harold Long to do that. And it's the one body in Isshinryu that doesn't care what other organization you belong to, who you came up under. Everybody that's Isshinryu comes together there, and they're all judged the same way. They're all given the same respect. And so I've really pledged the bulk of my loyalty to that group. That's what I aspire to support them and, showcase our school there where everybody across the United States can see what we're doing. And we've had people ask us, well, how do you do that? Can you do that? Can you teach me this? What about that? And you show them and you tell them what it's about, and they still don't change. And so, Isshinryu is not as prominent as it used to be. It's starting to die out too, just like so many others have. But it's still a long way from being dead because of the numbers of students and people that we have.
Have you heard about what people call Mick Dojos?
Well, Mick Dojos is something that my wife coined. And what it is franchise dojos. And franchise dojos in the last several years have become a big deal. I first ran across it in 1990 when some of the Taekwondo schools were doing that. They were opening schools, and they would take anybody that wanted to. We'll teach you on Saturday and Sunday what you're supposed to teach next week. And you got an instructor's belt, but you didn't have a black belt. So you could be a brand new student and opening a school with brand new students, and you had an instructor's belt and you were teaching for them. And that's the way it is. And we have some of those. We have one right down the road from us here in Novi. It was a franchise. They'd never been in martial arts, knew nothing about it. They bought into the franchise, cost them quite a bit of money. And the guy gave them a whole curriculum. This is what you teach. This is how you do that. They put a lot of stuff on video. He would come in and help work with them. But, it just doesn't work that way. And unfortunately, the people that sign up for these things, some of them sign up on contracts, and so they're stuck for the money. And they don't know that they're not really being taught martial arts by somebody that knows what they're doing. They're not even sure they're being taught real martial arts, because anybody can say in this country, oh, I started, Isshinryu Karate. Well, I'm the headmaster. I went and bought my red belt last week at Century Martial Arts, okay? They have no background at all, but people don't know how to check on that. They don't know how to look at that. So if you walk into a good dojo or a bad dojo, it's just, for most people, it's just the luck of the draw. That's why we've tried to stay in one place. We've got a reputation here. We've been around. Now, my school, where I have taught strictly on my program, has been around 30 years now this year, 30 years. We're known in the area, we're known all across the country, because I've kept ties with everybody, every organization. I don't care what it is. If it's if it's an Isshinryu organization, I stay on friendly terms with them. I don't try to tell them what to do, and I don't poo-poo what they're doing. And same thing, if you're a martial artist from another style, I'm still friendly with you. I'm not saying my system's better than yours, or that yours, isn't any good. I give you the respect to do what you're doing, because in truth, if you get good at whatever it is you learn, if you master it, truly master it, you'll be okay against the average person in the street. You may not be good against a professional. That's the difference. But if you're being attacked, and martial arts is about defending yourself, not about attacking someone else. If you take it from a defensive standpoint, you're always going to be have a slight edge. So I think as a martial artist, you need to learn some of the other systems. You need to go to seminars and work on the things that they think are good in other systems. You need to do some Tai Chi and some Kung Fu, and you need to do some other karate, so you can see what you're up against. So you have, when you see a person take a certain stance or they do a certain thing and you're in a conflict with them, you know how to defend yourself from that. Because for every aggressive move, there is some type of a defense. And that's the big thing. So with me, I've had some Krav Maga, I've had, Kung Fu, I've had Tai Chi, I've had Tai Chi combat. I've done the Tang Sudo, which is the art of, which is hardcore karate, Korean karate. Taekwondo, which is the art of high kicking. It is not karate. It is the art of high kicking. And then, mirrored other martial arts in Isshinryu, sword, weapons. These are all things that I've, trained in, been exposed to. Some of them I've got belts in, some of them I haven't. So it's enhanced my knowledge of how to use my Isshinryu.
What do you see as the future of karate and Isshinryu in the United States?
Well, I think it's dying out right now a little bit, and don't get me wrong that it's totally waning. There's a lot of martial art dojos out there yet today in Isshinryu, but it's harder and harder to get people into those, especially adults. And organizations are breaking down. The old masters of Isshinryu are dying off, and nobody's taking over the schools. Or they take over the school and they have their own ideas, and they're recreating the same problems that everybody else had when they first started. So they fail. They fail in the first year because they can't afford the building. And this is the problem: breaking away. You think you have knowledge, but you don't really get the knowledge till you've been in this thing for 10, 15 years. There's so much to learn, it's impossible to understand the higher things that you're learning or how to use it until you've really been seasoned for a while. That's a revelation that doesn't come for a long time. So there are many people out there that got their black belt and want to go open a dojo, and they don't go back and train. They think they got everything. They just got the basic tools. And so the things that really matter are getting lost. The stuff, the higher stuff that you need to learn, the tuate, and how to conduct yourself, and how to move, and how to be fluid, and how to drop your weight into your strikes. How to do precision strikes, because as you get older, you get slower. You can't just be banging away at each other. That's getting lost. There aren't enough martial artists that have stayed with their original instructor and been there long enough that they will teach them those things. And as every old master passes away, there aren't too many of us left that have a lot of that stuff. And so you can only teach so many people. So my goal these last several years has been to accelerate the training of several students, of my students, to give them more than they're really capable of understanding yet, but exposing it to them in such a way that they're going to use it, remember it, and then hopefully it'll click in the future. It'll make sense to them. All of a sudden they'll have that enlightening moment. And you see that in the system that I run right now. You see that with students on the very low end. You know, you're teaching, all of a sudden you see a light bulb go off in them. And, oh, I get this. And then, you know, another year goes by, 2 years go by. Oh, guess what? I get this. And I think the same thing's going to happen on the higher end of things. So I've got a few people that I'm exposing to that type of thing now. Not everybody, because some of them it'll overwhelm them. You have to have someone that's truly wants to learn in their heart. And when you see that person, you've got to give them something to keep them there. So they realize there's more to this, there's more to this. Because a lot of the training in many of the schools is just repetition, 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 the same boring thing. And we can't teach you that for another 3 years, you're not of rank. If you have that insatiable search for knowledge, and I can see that you're absorbing it, although you cannot master it yet, but you understand it, you can do it, you're just not mastering it yet, I will continue to feed you all the things that I have come across. And that's an awful lot, because I've been in martial arts for 48 years, only 30 years of my own school. But I taught for other instructors for 12 years. That's a long time. And trained. In the early days, the thing that's slowing down training today is you have a 2-hour class, or an hour class rather. Actually 45 minutes to an hour is what they say is ideal. Most of our classes are an hour. When I was training, it was minimum of 3 days a week, and a class was 2.5 hours long. 45 minutes doing calisthenics and physical training of the body. 45 minutes going over what you already learned, everything. Just doing punches and kicks. We would throw every class, you'd throw 30 of every kick and every punch, right hand and then left hand. So you'd be doing 400 or 500 punches, and you'd be doing 500-600 kicks. Okay, that's just the way it was. Then you would learn kata. Okay, a few minutes of kata, you'd get 4 or 5 moves, and they would teach you. Then you just practice those 4 or 5 moves. And when the instructor finally thought you had those after a couple of weeks, he'd teach you 3 or 4 more new moves. So it took a long time. Then when I started teaching, I taught at the school. I ran my first school that I actually opened out in Highland. It ran 6 days a week, and I would teach 5 hours a night, and I would teach on 5 hours on Saturday morning. Every class was an hour long, and I taught every class. And that is when I feel I really got good. Teaching like that for those 10 years at that school, every night, every night, every night, doing the basics, doing everything, that's what made me good. So you can't discount that. That's why I'm still fast at 70. I'm still fast at 70. I can still pinpoint hit something at 70 years old. That's because of the repetition. I don't have to think about it. I see the movement. When something starts to come at me, I see it before it happens. And so I'm reacting before the punch gets there. So the biggest thing for people training today is you must do the other training at home. You have to go out in the backyard and run your katas. You have to do your physical training on your own. And a lot of students don't do that. They're going to get a black belt because of the knowledge they have. That's what you're going to a dojo for. You get that knowledge, and when you have the knowledge and you can spew it out, you get your black belt degree. Now is when you're supposed to learn how to use it, how to make it work. And a lot of them stop and never learn how to make it work. That's the hard part. And I guess I've been very, very fortunate that the students that we've taken to black belt, most of them end up, before they leave me, going to 3rd or 4th degree. They stay and train with me, you know, an average of 10 or 12 years, some longer. Usually they come back on vacations from school, or once they've settled into their life, they come back, get married, they come back. This is what's going to build the longevity and make karate still relevant and stay. Having students bring their kids back to us, you know, now that they're grown and they have kids. But not many dojos have that. And this is the change that needs to happen in all martial arts. Some schools have kept people coming because now all of a sudden they got 15 degrees, 20 degrees, there's 40 degrees. No, there's not. That's just to keep people coming in and give them and paying money. That's what it's about. The whole system was never set up to be that way. And this is why sometimes the rest of the world laughs at American karate, because they see all this stuff happening and they're going, this isn't real. And then the other thing is, many of the martial artists here, they don't keep their certifications up everywhere else. I got my certifications from the World Isshinryu body. I got it from the American Okinawan karate body. I got it from Okinawa. I got my teaching certificates from all 3. I've gotten rank from all 3. You know, I've been recognized by other systems where they've given me rank because of my abilities and the fact that I can take and train masters of another system and get them to a black belt in our system, or train them to do things they've never done before. That's the thing that you've got to do. You can't say, oh, well, yeah, I got my thing from Joe Blow over here, and I'm gonna, no. My students can take my number that's registered, and that number will allow them to be recognized as being trained properly in the rest of the Isshinryu world and in Okinawa. That's not done anymore today. Most people don't go beyond that point. They don't go to that point. They just get their certificate. Even a lot of my students, they get their certificate from me, and that's it. They don't, you know, they don't really understand the ramifications of the rest of it. But I've had many students that come from somewhere else, and they got to start all over. Well, who is this guy that you learned this from? Nobody knows him. And what do you call that, a punch? What are you doing? You know, so they got to start all over, and it's disheartening to them. And unfortunately, that's because people let their ego get in the way. Instead of doing it properly, they just open their own school, they declare they're a master. I personally know guys that I was at a tournament with them, one tournament with them 1 year, and they're white belts, and I go to a tournament with them on the next one, and they're 3rd, 4th, 5th degree black belts. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And if you didn't know that person or remember them from something earlier, and now you run across them and they're talking up their situation, you wouldn't know, oh, I'm going to train under this guy. And there's a lot of that going on. So, you know, I like to try to teach the history of martial arts. And the way I teach history is I have to have 3 independent accountings and then it's probably the truth. It can't all come from the same source. There's no way to verify that. But if you have 3 independent verifications that say the same thing or pretty darn close, that's probably the truth. Because a lot of the martial arts history of Okinawa was lost during World War II. The place was bombed into oblivion. And so you have to be very careful. Even if today you buy a book on Isshinryu, well, you better get 20 books on Isshinryu and make sure that you find at least some things that agree, because every author puts his own spin on things. I've actually sat in my office when I was working at General Motors, and some other Isshinryu guys would come in that I knew that were older than me and been around longer, and they go, hey, Z, what do you think about this? I'm writing a book. How does this sound? And they would give me pages, and what is it? When were you called Mr. Isshinryu by Tatsushin Babuku? When did this happen? You know, they're making up stuff left and right, just trying to sound good and sell a book and soothe their egos. I often wanted to do a book that talks about those things. And maybe sometime here in the future before I die, I will do that. The truth, you know, there's so much phony baloney stuff out there, it's unbelievable. And don't get me wrong, I don't have all the answers, because I don't. But I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of things, and I know what's working for me. And for my students, I know that they're respected across the Isshinryu world, and that's the most important thing.
Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
Well, thank you.